The gender gap is growing this election cycle, with Vice President Kamala Harris struggling to win support from men, and former President Trump having the same issue with women. Podcaster Tim Pool and friend of Rising, Namiki Konst, who co-hosted with me yesterday, joined Piers Morgan to talk about this gap. Let's take a listen to some of Tim Pool's thoughts on the gender divide.
When it comes to the issue of men and women that you were just bringing up, women may hold their nose and vote for Donald Trump. And I think this is actually more of a left-leaning opinion, which for some reason I got a lot of flack for. But I think there are a lot of men who will not vote for a woman no matter what. And I think Kamala does have, there's obvious issues of professionalism, but I do think sexism will play a role in her not being able to win over men in this election.
And Nomiki went on to say she thinks women will decide the election. She explains what she thinks is causing the gender divide.
Part of the gender divide here right now is because folks like Tim Pool and others who once said that they were Bernie Sanders supporters, who I worked for, were suddenly pulling people away and pulling young men away and radicalizing them. So I think we have a problem with young men right now, and that they don't respect women, as you're seeing with Vinny. They don't respect facts. They don't read newspapers. They don't understand polls. They don't understand misogyny. They don't understand people of color. And they don't understand that that immigration bill was blocked.
And you know what, Namiki,
Donald Trump and his Republicans.
Namiki, I'll come to Tim for a response, but Namiki, what you may not understand is it's precisely that attitude towards younger men that is driving them to Donald Trump. And I think the election in the end will not be won with women, it will be won with men. And interestingly, increasing numbers of Black American men and Latino American men. So Tim Pool,
can I just challenge that for a second?
You can challenge it.
Men don't turn out at the same rates as women. It's really important. Women have a higher rate of turnout, they're more reliable voters, and young women are more left than they've ever been because of a lot of the online hate that they're seeing. So while Tim Pool might not like this, the majority of men actually do respect women.
I mean, on some level, this debate is tautological. Both men and women will decide the election, right? It's votes are fungible, right, or non-fungible. It's whoever, if fewer women vote for one, that's going to make an impact. If more men vote for the other, it's, 6 of 1, half dozens of the other, however that expression goes. I'm jumbling my own phrases here. But, and I'm sorry we don't have Nomiki on today so I can quarrel with her in person, or whatever we're doing here, if that even counts as in person. But I do disagree with her broader point, specifically that Bernie Sanders voters did not, this is kind of, in my view, a myth, and maybe I can argue about it with her when she's next on, but this idea that like Bernie Sanders or Sanders supporters didn't do enough to help pull Hillary Clinton over the finish line is, I think, some really revisionist or even some bitterness from the Hillary people. Like, Hillary did not show up enough in the key swing states where she lost votes. Yes, there was there were voters out there who liked Bernie, and then Trump was their second choice because both of them were speaking to sort of labor issues or working class issues in a way Hillary didn't, but that was on Hillary. Look, I can't deny that there isn't some sexism out in the world. There are probably voters who will not vote for a woman no matter if there was a Nikki Haley too, they wouldn't vote for a woman, I guess. Is that a large number of voters? I really tend to doubt it.
So I have complicated or mixed feelings about this, because on one hand, I do think that the criticism of female candidates often does betray a sexism, and I do think that they are sometimes held to different standards. And obviously right here and right now we have you and me, two men, discussing women and who votes for women and why they do not vote for women. I think the criticisms can be gendered, if we want to use that word. I also think Hillary Clinton is not a very talented politician. I have been always rather lukewarm about Kamala Harris as a politician, because I think she has pretty obvious shortcomings in terms of questions of authenticity and the capacity to really be compelling. Now, I do not think that at all goes across the board. I was personally surprised in 2020 that Elizabeth Warren did not do better in the Democratic primary than she did, because I thought that she was a strong advocate or a strong vehicle for the views that she represents. I understand that lots of our audience won't like those views, but that's neither here nor there in a Democratic primary. In relation to the Bernie Sanders question, I don't think that people, to the extent that they move from Sanders to Trump, did that because they were both men. I think it was because Sanders and Trump both represented a kind of vigorous anger with the way things are, with the status quo. Bernie Sanders would argue rightly that his actual views are vastly different from those of Donald Trump. But I think they both capitalized on a sort of alienation and anger, but I don't regard that as a misogynist anger. I regarded it as a sort of anti-status quo anger.
Yeah, there's a failure to speak to particularly young men these days in, I would say, elite circles that tend to be more progressive or more democratic leaning. Part of this is anecdotal, but I do hear it all the time that there is a pronounced rightward drift in young men, and that's a cultural thing. It's feeling maybe like they don't belong in the kind of world that elite progressives are creating, that sort of thing. There's something to it. You hear that from young people.
Well, there's something to it in that sentiment exists. I suppose what I would argue from a more liberal or left-leaning perspective than you is that actually just a resentment or grievance against an overdue balancing of gender fairness. I mean, I think the argument from the right is these radical ideas are coming to displace men and to disadvantage men. And I wonder, is it really that? Or is it the erosion of unfair advantages that men have enjoyed for centuries and a resentment against that? Coupled with, there are genuine economic factors, I think, why particularly younger working class men are sort of disappointed with parts of their lives and feel resentful of that. But to me, like, some of this is coming from a resistance to fairness, not, in my view, a resistance to radicalism.
Well, it might be partly a resistance to fairness. Obviously, there have been achievements for greater equality of the sexes, of the genders, that are good. That the legal system doesn't treat women as just hysterical liars or something like that is obviously a positive development. I would say there are also excesses that have taken place that have made young men feeling maybe more justifiably snubbed. I think I did bring this up last week, but I used to do a lot of reporting on college campus disciplinary procedures, particularly around sexual misconduct that were, in my view, remarkably unfair to the accused, which was often young men, which is not to say that there wasn't a legitimate problem of sexual misconduct or that you shouldn't take it seriously. Of course you should, but that some of these procedures were pretty unfair to men. It's long been the case that custody disputes for kids are pretty biased against males. I think that's something even really the mainstream people have recognized for a long time. Men have been, falling behind academically, employment-wise, in a lot of ways, and that's partly because of the changing world, and it's unavoidable, but maybe there are aspects of it that are less unavoidable than others. Yeah,
look, it is legitimately a tangled issue, and I guess my fear is that sometimes excesses, which I acknowledge exist, are used as representative of everything regarding gender relations. And then one picks out, for example, the custody issue, which is well established, or some of the campus disciplinary issues. And then those get utilized to delegitimize almost every effort to undo sexism or to advance women or simply to level the playing field. And I think that the danger there is that the delegitimization of those things is in itself dangerous.
Coming up next, is Nancy Pelosi being shunned by Biden world? We're going to discuss that and a lot more. Stay tuned for additional rising content right after this.